Good evening, ma'am. Today we will presentation with our topic is Dangling modifier. Number one is introduction. The English language is one of the most fascinating subjects that we can investigate, and those of us who speak and write English can find pleasure in seeking to understand its various aspects. Although the English language is flexible and continue changing, it is possible to follow certain principles and to observe certain characteristics of usage which can make grammar relatively exact study and one which can widen the scope of the individual in a satisfying way. Knowledge of standard English is acceptable from its basic to the education of all college students. Learning a grammatical term is an essential step toward understanding what is correct and what is incorrect in speech and writing. Number two is modifier. Modifiers are important elements of writing, describing and qualifying another word to change its meaning. As such, they are often employed across many piles of writings to stellar result. Unfortunately, they are also misused in huge way. A modifier must always have two words to modify. A modifier changes, clarifies, and qualifies, or limits particular words in a sentence in order to add emphasis, explanation, or detail. Modifiers tend to be descriptive words, such as adjective and adverb. Modifier pairs, such as adjective clause and adverbial pairs, also exist and tend to describe adjective and adverb. The next will be continued by my friend. Thank you.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I will explain you about dangling modifier. A dangling modifier is a specific case of which is a dangling participle is an error sentence structure whereby a grammatical modifier is associated with a word other than the one intended or with no particular word at all. For example, a writer may have meant to modify the subject, but word order make the modifier seems to modify an object instead. Such ambiguity can lead to unintentional humor or difficulty in understanding a sentence. The dangling modifier is one of most insidious on confusion, causing problems in the English language. Dangling modifier usually occur when a group of words, most often a verbal pairs, is not clearly connected to what it modifies. When the modifier occurs at the beginning of the sentence, reader usually accept it to modify the subject of the sentence. When it does not logically do that, the modifier is said to dangle. The dangling modifier can change the intended meaning of sentence dramatically, which make reader have to slow down in order to sort out meaning. The dangling modifier also sometimes creates strange images in reader minds. The next I will explain about correcting dangling modifier. Dangling modifier may be correct in two general ways. The method one is revise the main clause. One method of fixing a dangling modifier is to leave the modifier as it and rewrite the main clause so that it begins with subject being modified. The method number two is the revise the modifier pairs. Another method of fixing a dangling modifier is to include the subject in introductory pairs, leaving the main clause as it is. In the correct sentence, the dangling modifier is replace a complete clause that clearly states and subject who doing in the action. Thank you.
Next is about types of prepositional phrases. Prepositional phrases can modify nouns, verbs, phrases, and complete clauses. Prepositional phrases can also be embedded inside other prepositional phrases, modifying nouns, adjectival phrases,
When a phrase modifies a noun or pronoun, it calls an adjective of phrases. These types of phrases often specify a person or thing. In context, they clarify a distinction between several possibilities. For example, Stella is the runner with the fastest time. It's likely there are other runners who are slower, as the sentence is specifying who is the fastest. The phrase is modifying the noun runner. Adjective or phrases come directly after the noun they modify. Next is modify verbs. Adverbial phrases. Adverbs modify verbs, and sometimes the adverb is an entire adverbial phrase. These phrases often describe when, where, why, how, or to what extent something happened. For example, this course is the most difficult in the state. The prepositional phrases specifies where there might be other courses that are more difficult in other states, but this one is the most difficult here. Let's say it's just one difficult course of several in the state. This course is among the most difficult in the states. The among phrase is an adjective of phrase modifying the course, and the final phrase remains adverbial, still telling where. Next, she ran the marathon with pride on Saturday. The first prepositional phrase specifies how she ran, a verb, and the second specifies when. Both are adverbial phrases. Next is about list of preposition. Here are some of the most commonly used prepositions in English. Be aware that just because a word in a sentence is on this list doesn't mean that it's being used as a preposition in any particular context. Many of these words can also be other parts of speech, such as verbs or subordinating conjunctions.
Morning, ma'am. My name is Rikender, and I will continue my French presentation. 5.3 An infinitive phrase. In English grammar, an infinitive phrase is a verbal construction made up of the particle to and the base form of a verb with or without modifiers, complements, and objects. Also called an infinitive phrase and to infinitive phrase. Example: unclear. To wash the car, soap and water is needed. Clear. To wash the car, you need soap and water. Unclear. To be successful student, good study habits needs to be developed. Clear. To be successful student, we need to develop good study habits. 5.4 An elliptical phrase. An elliptical clause is one in which the subject or verb is implied rather than stated. The subject of the main clause or else is dangling. Elliptical sentence construction involves the omission of words from a sentence. These omitted words are implied by other elements within the sentence. Example: unclear. Drinking a cup of coffee, the cat leaped on the table. Clear. Drinking a cup of coffee, I saw the cat leap on the table. Number 6. Conclusion. It is no longer surprising to find modifiers used in a bad manner. Whether dangling or misplaced, they muddy up the sentence, potentially creating confusion and changing its meaning. As mentioned before, a dangler modifier describes a particular object that is not in the sentence at all. In conclusion, in order to avoid the confusion generated by misplaced or dangling modifiers, whenever writers have a word, phrase, or clause that is modifying, saying something about another word's phrase or clause, they should place the modifier as close as possible to whatever it is intended to modify. If you suspect a sentence of having a dangling modifier, Check it by inserting the nearest noun into the modifier and turning it into a complete sentence. If the result is logical and true, the modifier is most likely properly placed. If the result does not create a logic meaning, the modifier is likely dangling. It is very important to know how to recognize and correct dangling modifiers. That's all about our presentation. Thank you.